What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Tea Time with Unfold. I'm going to be your host. My name is Michael Yonke. I do Webflow development here. And today we're going to be hearing from two of our web designers, Alex and Benten Woodring. And they're going to talk through just how we use typography in web design. I'm going to pass this off over to Benten and let him introduce himself.
Yeah, my name's Benten, senior web designer at Unfold. I've been hosted a couple tea times before. Actually, all of us have been on chatting web design. But yeah, we're going to be getting into typography best practices. We'll be walking through an actual client project from the basic wireframe to the final product. And we might even be able to see a live site at the end, which I'm excited to share.
Alex.
Yeah, my name is Alex. I've been with Unfold for about a year and a half now, and I get to work with Michael Yonke and Benten pretty much every day. And so we get to fool around and do different web designs. So definitely excited to kind of share what we get into every day and kind of share some of our little tips and tricks for typography. So yeah, ready to jump in.
Amazing. Yeah, I don't know where you guys want to start. I know we're going to kind of keep this super low key and just no pressure. We're going to talk through a bunch of things. I'm going to be following you guys in Figma. So I'll let you guys kind of start wherever you want to start. And my job is just going to be asking questions, and I'll make sure that anybody in the chat is heard and we answer some of their questions. I know somebody in the chat already brought up what's our favorite typeface, and people are saying Comic Sans. Of course, Eddie says Kodak Cold. So we'll get into questions like that. Things like, do you have any favorite plugins for contrast? Maybe favorite foundries, how to use animation with typography, different questions like that. But we'll answer those along the way. We'll keep an eye on the chat. So if you do have a question, make sure you put it in the chat. And yeah, I'm going to pass it off to you guys. I'm going to start following along, and you can go from wherever you want.
Yeah, so just to give a rundown of what we will be doing today, we're going to be designing a website for a company called AppFest. This is actually a real client project that we did. I'm trying to figure out when we launched it a few months ago, late last year, I think. But they are a real estate investing company. So they basically take large apartment complexes and kind of like remodel them and turn them into investment properties. And they make it really easy for people to invest and kind of make an impact on their community. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be starting with a really basic wireframe. And today we'll be focusing on typography when it comes to web. So we'll have like the really rough content for this. We'll be doing the homepage, but you'll notice that everything is unstyled. This is just a wireframe. So the actual content that we had written for this site, we'll be starting with that and figuring out how to best style this in a way that makes content easy to consume. So there'll be a couple of things that we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about like line height, which is the spacing between text, like vertical spacing. We'll be talking about hierarchy, how to make this more skimmable, because right now everything's pretty flat. It's kind of hard to consume information. So we'll be talking about that. And we'll even get into other best practices and some resources like font pairing and kind of some resources you can dig into around that. Alex, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add before we get into it.
No, I think that sounds good. We have a little cheat sheet. We have kind of our text styles established over here, so we can kind of pull from. But yeah, we can kind of talk about things as we start getting into it.
Yeah. Before we do that, though, anyone have any specific questions when it comes to typography and web design, or just anything when it comes to web design? Because you got the whole Unfold web team. So if you have anything, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we can kind of work through those as we start designing. All right, so here's our wireframe, and we've done, this is like a cooking show, so we've basically done all the design work since this is a real client project, but we're gonna kind of work on different sections and talk through them and then kind of move on to like the next stage, basically. So Alex, how would you, if you were just handed this wireframe, how would you start to adjust typography?
Yeah, good point. Good question. Yeah, so since we have sort of the type styles established over here, some of that hard work's done. And so on a normal project, we'll spend some time kind of coming up with font styles and things. It depends on if we have a really good like brand foundation to kind of pull from. There might be some of that typography expiration already kind of figured out for us. But on a typical project, Benson and I kind of go off and like explore a bunch of different typefaces and things. So in terms of this layout, obviously, like you said, there's no hierarchy whatsoever. Everything's the same, 12-point font or whatever, 20-point font. And so there's just nothing to kind of read first. There's no hierarchy. So we need to establish that hierarchy first. And so the best place to start doing that is with your number one heading, which is called your H1. And so we can just pick that style from here. So we have, these aren't plugged in, but you can copy this style over so that we have a real chunky heading up top. So that's the first thing you see on the page. And that's going to be the most important thing on the page as well. And so having this H1 kind of established, that's the tier one of our hierarchy, I'd say. And then we can kind of continue on. This actually, I think, works well to have a paragraph right below that. So you read this text first, and then if you continue on reading, that's sort of a secondary tier to that. And so feel free to
Alex,
jump in.
Why did we pick this certain typeface? Is there a reasoning behind that? Like for this specific project? Like why are we going serif?
We went serif, I think because we had done some branding foundational work. This company in particular, they deal with lots of investors who are going to pour lots of money into these investment properties. And so we wanted this to feel very premium. And so a way to do that was to use a serif font versus something a lot more modern, like a sans serif. So we wanted something that had a little bit more luxury kind of feeling to it. We'll get into some of the colors and stuff that also add to that feeling of kind of more of a premium brand. But that was sort of the initial reason for this, was something that just felt a little bit more old school and a little bit more luxury.
Right. Yeah. And if I remember from the brief, they were looking to really differentiate themselves from competitors, which is a big selling point as well. A lot of others, we definitely wanted to make it feel more upscale, since people are investing, money into this in a way that feels more refined and kind of fits some of the brand work that our team had designed. And I feel like you can, just making that one change, you can already see a huge difference just in that hero section. It already makes it easier to consume information, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's helpful to have good copywriting as well. I think, next to visually separating things with a hierarchy, having copy that fits the space well, because, sometimes you can have a really short headline that doesn't have the same impact, or something that's quite longer. So having kind of the right amount of copy and the right chosen words really helps for that as well.
Before we get into the next thing, we got a couple of questions in the chat. Lots of familiar faces. What's up, Phil? Pavel, Jordan, Eddie. We got some questions. Like one is from, is it Ollie or Ali? What features do you look for when picking type or font for a project? I'm not sure if that you're talking about the actual typeface, or if it's like kind of like the goal that we're looking to accomplish. Like in this one, we're trying to make it feel more high end and refined, which I think a serif accomplishes a little bit better than a sans serif, at least in this specific instance. And you'll get to see kind of like the final product at the end. I don't know if you'd add anything, Alex.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess the full question. A lot of the time what we do too is we have the titles kind of written out, and then we'll browse through a bunch of fonts. And so things that we're looking for is just consistency across the board. I mean, a lot of great fonts out there that have a lot of consistency, but looking for specific characters might have kind of a different ligature or different layout or something that might kind of spark the right look and feel. And so just kind of browsing, I think, helps establish those font like pairings and things. I'm not sure I answered the question correctly, but definitely looking for kind of the right variety. Like this old classic G would fit perfectly, whereas different serifs might have this, different format or something like that. So just trying to find the right character that kind of fits the overall brand, or maybe some of the features. I'm not sure that answers everything, but
yeah, I can say it's more art than science. It definitely plays into like font pairing, where you want them to have a little bit of contrast. You don't want them to be too similar. Like in this instance on this site, we're using a sans serif in addition to a serif. Like with body copy, having sans serif having serif is a little hard to read, especially at smaller sizes. So functionally, those are some things to take into consideration. But Alex, I'll let you keep moving down, and I think we got a couple other questions that you can pepper in a little bit too.
Yeah, I might not touch this at the moment. I might actually move down to the next section. So past our H1 heading, the next thing you do is come up with a slightly smaller heading. So we have an H2. So I'm going to apply that style. And so it really does have to do with sizing. Obviously, bigger words, your brain's going to read that first, is going to be more kind of eye capturing. So having that, the biggest thing on the page be your most important headline makes a lot of sense. And then we're scanners. I think a lot of the time we don't read every single sentence. You would assume that having text on the page, you read everything. It's really not the case. We definitely kind of scan things. And so and especially on the web now, we're looking for big headlines and buttons. I think we're just sort of trained to like gravitate towards those things. Because when I sort of just look at this page now, I see big old headline and I see button, and then I might read this text as well. And so having kind of your less important but supporting copy in these sort of subheadings makes a lot of sense. So going from this top line heading to your H2, just sort of guiding the user down the page. And so we have additional content down here that's slightly smaller.
Yeah. I definitely add like that people don't read everything on a website. That's why we definitely push to have brevity in our copy. So writing for, like an article or a social post or something is very different than a website. You want short, punchy headlines. And like you said, kind of guide the user down the page from kind of most important to next important to kind of least important. So adding some hierarchy with the sizing of your type goes a long way.
Yeah, totally.
And it looks like we have another question that we did pass up from Pavel in the chat. And he was just wondering, which font file type is better to use when shipping out a website. And he's asking about the difference between OTF and TTF. And, I guess the biggest thing is just support for browsers. So the most supported is, I always call it WOFF, WOFF. I think it's Web Open Font, I'm guessing format. And then there's TTF and OTF, which is True Type and Open Type. And those are the most supported. So when you're making a website, you obviously want to make sure that you're using one of those two file types. And when it comes to which one's best for the web, I'm not going to get real deep into this, but I'll just say essentially WOFF is a more compressed version of TTF and OTF. So I do prefer that. It does have some additional data attached to it that can be useful, but I'll leave it at that. The most important thing is using something that is supported by the browser, and that is definitely WOFF, TTF, or OTF, not necessarily 2.0, WOFF 2.0, or an embedded open type or something like that.
Yeah, I think Yankee, I think you were the best poised to answer that question, because I feel like Alex and I were just designing stuff, and then you bring it to life.
I don't know if I knew that difference.
As a developer.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes that's hard because we will choose fonts, or maybe a client will be really attached to a font, and you won't always be able to get, WOFF or TTF or OTF. They may only provide it in one or the other. So sometimes you're constrained by that, but the most important thing is browser support, and WOFF, TTF, and OTF are all completely fine for that. That's a nice circle you made there, Alex.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stand in for a logo.
We got another question from Jordan. Is there a minimum or a maximum font size you should stay within for a website? I feel like Yankee and the web team, we always kind of battle it out a little bit, because I feel like a lot of times Alex and I will just design these like massive things, and then Yankee, as a Webflow developer, has to figure out how to implement it for all screen sizes. So I think it really depends on the style that you're looking for. Like if it's a really bold site that you just want it to be really in your face, or if you want it to be more refined, I think it can definitely change. There are definitely some best practices with like type scaling and things like that to help provide hierarchy. But again, I think a lot of that can be somewhat subjective depending on the project. I don't know if you guys would agree with me.
Yeah, Jordan, there is no too big of a font nowadays, I feel like. They're enormous. Yeah, and then Jordan also asked, do you always adjust the kerning and leading for each headline size? I can answer that for you guys. And yes, they do on every single one, I swear. They make me do it for everything. Even if it's by 1%, they always adjust it. So perfect.
We're always messing with stuff. I'd say, like, for me personally, I like to stay, like for headlines, I like to stay within like 100% to 110. Sometimes I'll do 90, like if I want to be real tight, like if it's all caps or something like that. But for body copy, we definitely want to add a little bit more room to breathe. So like, for example, our paragraph here, our body copy is 160% line height. And obviously we're working on, switching over to using rims as part of our process, just because that's a little bit easier on the dev side. But that's usually what we're looking at. It's a little more spacing in the body copy to allow things to breathe, and then usually a little bit tighter on headlines. And then as far as leading, like we'll go anywhere from 0% to -3% to plus a couple percent. Just it really depends on just the actual typeface itself. Like this one, we're at -1 just because this one ends up being a little bit more tracked out at 100%. Yeah.
Since we're talking about headlines, maybe I'll just ask, do you guys have any animations for, I'll call like specifically headlines or large text right now that you guys are really drawn to? I know there's a lot of GSAP type text animations that are going around right now specifically. I know in our chat, we were talking about codebydentist.com / can't remember which project it was, Arcane, I think. And, on scroll, you're filling in the text with different color, just different things like that. Is there anything that sticks out to you guys that feels trendy for animation for text that you like, or anything that you think people should avoid with text animation or headline animation specifically?
I feel like Alex would probably agree. I think it's very easy to overdo the motion. Like having everything animate and move all the time can be a little bit overdone. I think that's kind of easy to do. I feel like a lot of times we're more in the camp of having more subtle movement, like kind of the tried and true, like slow reveal type on scroll down. But Yankee, honestly, you've turned me on to a lot of new ones that I haven't seen as or I haven't used much, which is like when each line reveals one by one within a box. I'm not sure what you would call that. What's the name for that? That's GSAP, isn't it? Or is that the green sock?
You can do it you can do it in a lot of different ways. But yeah, I don't know, maybe text reveal is what I'd call it. I'm not sure exactly what everybody calls it, but it's basically just when a line is within an overflow box and it just comes up or comes in from some way. But it does look good. A lot of people do it right now.
Yeah. Alex, what about you?
But I think I was just going to add, I think the most important thing is just that your animations, like, they match the type of brand that you're going for. So for example, like if you have a bright, very happy website, tons of colors and things, maybe your animations should be more punchy, as opposed to if you're going for like a very high-end, like luxury watch company. Maybe you want your animations to be a lot slower and smoother and kind of give off that same feel that the brand is going with. And that goes for all animations, not just text animation.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd probably add to that too, just animating with intentionality. When I started doing web design years ago, I've been in this game a long time, like 10 years ago, every single website used parallax. It was the coolest thing. I don't even know what technology was around at the time, but everyone had parallax, and it was animating or having transitions just for the heck of it because it was cool. I think having that temptation, like having a toolbox where you can basically do anything you want, is overwhelming at some time. So you can definitely kind of overdo it, like Benten said. And so, yeah, like Yankee was saying, having sort of the right look and feel that matches your overall brand. And so I'm not a huge fan of type animating. I mean, maybe there's some movement or something. We'll get into some examples later. Fades are always kind of nice. I wouldn't probably overdo it. I would have, maybe one kind of big dramatic reveal up top, and then kind of keep text to a minimum in terms of animation, because you can definitely overdo it for sure.
Yeah, good point. Because I mean, the main thing we want is we want the visitor to be able to consume the information and also give off like a feel to the user. So sometimes overdoing it takes away from that feel, and makes it so they can't consume everything, because everything is just moving on the page. You don't know where your eye's supposed to look. But we're halfway through our stream already. So I'm gonna let you guys keep going. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're good. Yeah, I've just started working my way down the page a little bit. So we've established these kind of like the styling. Like we've got our H1, we've got our H2. And so basically we're just starting to work our way down the page. So we have our paragraph types established. So once you get that, it's pretty easy. You're just kind of copying and pasting. And for example, we have like kind of a larger section here where we have our H2 and a large paragraph, and then we have our H2 down here, but then we have some stats. So these are a little bit smaller. And we actually end up designing these in a different way on the final site. But again, it's just kind of showing the hierarchy there as we've got our headline with some body copy. That's kind of the priority. And then we have a link and then some stats over here. And then we had to include a source, so we included a descriptor type, which this is just 14-point font, which is not as large because it's not as important as some of the other information that's being displayed.
I got a question for you. On a Twitter thread recently, I saw basically somebody put two things side by side where, if you guys follow me to the top right here, or top left of the page, where I think there were 2 or 3 examples. One was where the heading, the supporting text, and the button were all evenly spaced. And I think that's how this is. There was another version where the button was farther away from the information here. And there was another version where the supporting text was closer to the button and the headline was kind of away. I'm just curious, right now we have even spacing. I think that we do that quite often. I'm just curious if you guys have any thoughts on which way might be the best way.
Yeah, I'd say that one's probably pretty subjective too, because I know I've designed all 3 ways. I think this one works pretty well just because optically it feels pretty balanced. But there are definitely some typefaces where I'll have, the body copy and headline a little bit closer together, and then the button will be a little bit further. I don't know. What about you, Alex? I know I kind of change depending on the project.
Yeah, and I'd say it depends on how much space. So if this hero, if we decided that we needed a big old graphic over here, it's going to feel too cramped this way. And so that's the way you can kind of separate things, is you clump these together and then you can expand the spacing a little bit further so the button seems a little bit more balanced on the composition. And I'd say too, if you guys aren't using auto layout, definitely get into it for typography. It makes all of this so much easier. So if I were to go in here and say I want to have another line break or something, all the text is pushed down. I can think back to old Illustrator days, Adobe Illustrator, using all the margins you had set in place and all that, and having to move everything anytime you made any kind of change. So I'd say like Figma's auto layout is like a game changer for that. And so you can group things together and have these 2 closer together, and then buttons and all that. Definitely recommend it if you're not using it.
Yeah, auto layout's like a huge game changer. Like I feel like the speed at which I can design is at least doubled, maybe more than that, just from being able to quickly move things around like that and adjust spacing.
Cool. Yeah, maybe that's why the Twitter thread was so kind of pulled in different directions. There was just one answer.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of like, I don't know, we design pretty optically a lot of the times, and then we kind of go back through and tighten things up to make sure that we got consistent spacing. And that's something, Yankee, you've been helping us with too, because a lot of times we just like quickly iterate and design, but you have to make it work for a live site. So having even spacing or consistent spacing throughout makes it a lot easier for it to be developed.
Yeah, and just things like if you have an H1 lead text and a button, creating a component there where you can change it once. Maybe you want 24 spacing between all 3 objects or elements. You don't have to go through and change it all over on all the pages that you've created, just on one component, since it's basically using the same elements.
Right.
So yeah, I'm following you around, Alex, right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a couple more sections here. And I know we're not really adding color too much. I don't know if you talked about this, Benten, but having a text link here to stand out from the paragraph text. I'm not sure you mentioned that. Another way to kind of differentiate things is having opacity. And stop me again, I was kind of focused when you were designing earlier, but having kind of full opacity versus if everything was the same level of opacity, it just makes it a little bit harder to kind of scan through things. And so you again have another layer of hierarchy by reducing the different hierarchy. And it's more apparent, I'd say, on a darker background. So if this was even darker, because this is pretty mild, if this was super dark, you could have this realistically even at 50% opacity or 40%, and you have an even stronger, I say, sense of hierarchy. We have this little ear mark up top here, eyebrow is the correct term, and then we have the heading. This could even be kind of a lower opacity, and so you really do read that headline first, and so then you continue down the section here.
Yeah,
well, that brings me
I'd
to
say that's like
another...
a really good point. Is adding like that makes such a big difference because it allows your brain to process this type much more quickly. Like not only does the sizing help add hierarchy, but just like knocking 20% of opacity off body copy, it helps so much. It just makes it a lot easier to process. That's a great point.
Yeah, totally.
And as we get into these light grays on black, that's a good place to stop and ask, do you guys have any favorite Figma plugins for contrast checking and things like that to make sure that we're designing for everybody out there?
I like to use contrast, which is by MDS. That's the one I like the most. There are definitely other ones out there, like Stark, and I feel like there are a couple others.
And how about vertical text? I'm seeing that there's some vertical text over here. I didn't know if we'd get into that, but I know there's some people that love it, some people that hate it, some people don't care at all. But just curious, if you guys have any thoughts on it, more of a supporting text type thing. If somebody makes their menu, say vertical, for example. I've seen that a lot recently.
Yeah. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say, again, it's sort of subjective. We can digest numbers really easily, especially when they're sequential. So this makes sense. If it was a super long word or something, it put a little bit more strain on the user's like mental capacity to read that. And I'd say too, there's a difference between, I know we're talking about vertical text. So this is just text turned sideways. I don't even know if Figma supports it, but like old school vertical text should never do, which is, going down. It's all 90 degrees going down is the worst thing in the world. I'll never do that. But we definitely use like vertical text in different places. We have a little supporting copy going up the side of something just to add a little bit more kind of small, subtle details that have kind of a old school vibe to them. Wouldn't necessarily fit for this layout, but
yeah, I think it's more.
I'd
for
say
optics
it'd definitely be more like decorative or less like you don't want copy that needs to be read in order to understand the site to be vertical.
Yeah, totally.
Challenge accepted.
Have a whole site be vertical text. That would make it fun.
Yeah.
But
we'll try that on our next client project.
Yeah. I saw that Bento asked a question. Do you have a specific rule or formula for the length of your content? Is there a way, or is there a particular character count that you aim to stay under? I don't know if we have like a hard and fast rule. I'd say that we definitely like shorter is better in most cases, like with headlines, especially like the hero headline, like trying to keep it to just a few words as much as possible with most headlines, honestly. Alex, do you have like a rule that you try to stick to?
Not a rule. It is kind of just a hunch or a feeling, kind of looking at something. I'd say this is even a little bit long. And so that's a good kind of point to have too, is try to find people to work with that are collaborative. And so we have a great copywriter, Beth. She's amazing. We can kind of go in and make suggestions. It's sort of a give and take process. So we can go in here and say, all that great copy you wrote, this is how it looks laid out. And we're having a little bit of trouble with just kind of how long this paragraph is. And we can kind of give her some suggestions and say, I really like this to kind of cut off, about here or so. And sometimes we can just edit ourselves and she approves it. Other times she'll kind of go back in and make changes. And so, yeah, like you said, Benten, not really a hard and fast rule, but just making sure it kind of feels good within that composition. And then just having that kind of give and take collaboration and allowing, a lot of the time copy will inform our designs and vice versa. And so having a great kind of copywriter in your corner makes all the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely like a very collaborative process. Like we go back and forth. Sometimes the wireframes are done first. Sometimes the content is written first, but there's always a lot of collaboration each step of the way. So yeah, we're once we get things into layout, we might have to adjust things. Like on paper, it might look great, but if there's like a certain component that we're trying to design with this content in mind, it could change as we kind of go through the process.
Yeah, I think I mean, one of the main goals is just to get the user to consume the information. If you just have paragraph after paragraph, it's not going to happen. And I know there's a give and take between design and SEO and different things like that. But you'll oftentimes see, the really important information is right there in front of your eyes. And I'll just give like an example of maybe like Amazon, like an Amazon product listing page, where you have all the important information right in front of you. But if you want to learn, what the dimensions of the box are, it's hidden behind maybe a click, or they can get to it if they want to, but it's not necessarily competing with everything else on the page.
Yeah, agreed. I was also going to ask, we had mentioned like font pairing. Like Alex, do you have like resources that you like to use when you're selecting type? Like first, like where do you go? Like what do you go to Type Foundries? Are you using Google Fonts? And then second, like how do you choose font pairings? Like how did you come to choose these two and like select these for the project?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I probably should have a better answer. I don't necessarily go to great like font pairing. There's some really good, I think Typewolf has great like font pairing combinations and things. I'm not very good at that. A lot of the time at Unfold, we have great brand designers who kind of make font suggestions and things. And so we usually have a really good foundation to go off of. But I'd say, there's hundreds of fonts within Google and Adobe. And so just going in there, having some real text to kind of put into their like live view, little input fields really helps a lot. And so having your actual title, seeing kind of how it looks and feels, and then just sort of experimenting, it's kind of the way to go. Over time, you just start building up kind of your favorites and whatnot. And so having those kind of tucked away in a file or something to kind of reference later it just takes sort of time to kind of build those preferences and stuff. And I'd say too, it's always really smart to pair a serif with a sans serif. If these were both serifs or sans serifs, it would just have a kind of a different look and feel. I think pairing two serifs is never ideal unless they're like one's more of a display, kind of more impactful, and one's a little more readable. So you sort of have a little bit of rules around that. But I don't know, Benton, do you have any specific resources that you go to?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think a lot of it does just come down to experience and just kind of playing with type and practicing. Typewolf is definitely one of my favorites. Like if I'm trying to do something unique where the brand team hasn't already established typography, that's one I visit quite a bit because it also provides like Adobe Typekit or Adobe font options, which is great because we use that a lot in addition to Google Fonts. That was probably my favorite. But yeah, I'd say like as web designers, we're not like limited necessarily, but usually these are more established by the time we get to the web portion of the project if the brand work has already been done. So it's not as much free reign as like the brand team, for example.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying we're always collecting inspiration. I think every designer does that. And so if you go off and see a really great font pairing, save it, look it up. Maybe, if you don't know the font pairing, ask the author or whatever. Or there's even great tools to like take a picture of a cool type that you saw and then AI kind of figures out what font it is. So like just going out in the world and seeing things that you like and kind of adapting your style around that is really helpful. So that's all I say.
And I was just going to say, I love fontshare.com. They're all free fonts, but they're all very high quality. I also love their website from just a usability standpoint. I think it's nice. So if you're ever looking for free fonts that are very high quality, that's a good place to look.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think you shared that one recently, and I hadn't actually been on that one, but they have a lot on there.
Well, we got about 12. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, one last thing before we move on. I was going to say another tool I use all the time is the inspect tool, like in your browser. So if you haven't done that, if you're ever in like Chrome or whatever browser you're using, you can right click on a website and figure out what fonts they're using. and I use it all the time. So it's like if I'm really curious of what this specific font is, I can do that. It'll tell you the line height. It'll tell you the font family. It's super helpful, and like type sizing. So that's a great, if you're trying to learn and try to understand sizing and font pairing, that's like a great tool to use.
Yeah, I use a plugin for that on Chrome, or actually on Arc, but shout out to Arc, love it. I think it's called What Font? Maybe I used to use another one called Font Ninja, but those are two that you can just click on any font and it gives you, the size of the font, the color, the name of the font family, everything you need to know about the font, basically. So that's really nice.
Nice. I haven't tried that one. That sounds like a lot easier. It sounds like I'm doing it the hard way.
I did the same thing, Benton. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Anyways, like I said, we have about 10 minutes left. So if you guys want to keep going, I know we haven't gotten too far, a lot of questions and kind of going into detail on things, but we'll see how far we can get before we hit 3:00 Eastern.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is just like a cooking show. So we're going to poke around a little bit and then we'll just move over and to the final product and pretend we designed the whole thing in 30 minutes. You guys want to do that?
I love it. We'll take it out of the oven. It's already done.
Yeah. It's freshly baked website.
Yeah. Should we do it?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's move over to the final website.
I'm following you, Benten.
Yeah, so we're taking a really big leap from really basic wireframe to the final product, but figured we could show how all of these small decisions that we made kind of result in the final product. Obviously, there's a lot more going into it than just typography. We're creating whole photo compositions and adding a lot of other graphic elements. And bringing in color. So there are a lot of other things happening, but you can see that these decisions that we've made with typography have kind of carried through. Like we've kept the serif, we've made some adjustments. I know, I believe the italics was part of the brand work that we did. So that was something that we brought in. But you can see we've knocked down opacity on the body copy. It makes it really nice and easy to read and real skimmable. We have these links that use the brand colors. And that was one that we needed to make sure that one was accessible. And that one passed. So trying to keep that in mind too, as you're designing things. Sometimes you need to adjust color specific for the web. That's a whole different conversation, but some things to keep in mind. And we even got button styling. So we're using an uppercase in this instance. And I think that was also established by the brand team to use, this is Termina uppercase. So that we actually have 3 here, which is we don't always do that. Most of the time we try to keep it pretty limited. But I think in this instance, it works really well to have 3. That's one practice that we try to keep is limiting type styles. So instead of, going with 3 or 4 more different fonts, just trying to focus on adjusting sizing and weight first before trying to add a bunch of different type styles. But in some cases it works, like in here, this instance.
Yeah, I like the all caps for eyebrows and buttons, especially when the client is more of a, I don't want to say high end, but it's not, we're not building like a startup SaaS product or something. This is real estate investing. It's a more serious type of product that we're creating. So I like the use of caps and eyebrows and buttons for those kind of websites specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, and then with this, with web, we always need to design for more than one device as well. So we have to consider, mobile type sizing, tablet, and kind of what that looks like, whether it's scaling up or down between those two, or if we're choosing specific sizes to stop at. So on mobile, everything's going to be quite a bit smaller. And we use a tool called, or at least I do, Figma Mirror. So you can use your you can use your phone and have it on there. And it's always going to look way different on your device than on your desktop. So you can go down quite a bit. Like body copy goes down from 20 to 18 or 18 to 16, which I believe we go down a fair amount. And everything can be a little bit tighter too. Like the spacing between text and elements can be quite a bit tighter.
I got a question for you that I know it comes up with more copywriting. Just curious your guys' take on this. Um, so let's say you have two headlines. One is kind of like, let's say like a full sentence. We help your investments work for you, period. And then maybe having like let's see, maybe I'm trying to find one maybe on, okay, like here's a good example, like invest smarter. You know, if you're not using like an entire full sentence, do you guys always use like what's your guys' preference? Because I know this is all over the web, like different ways people do it. Do you always put a period at the end? Or would you prefer to capitalize both letters in this and not use a period? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? I know we go back and forth and it's more of a copywriting thing, not necessarily a text web design thing, but it's something that whenever I'm looking over files, it's something I always notice of just making sure there's consistency between those two.
Yeah, I'd say like I think as long as you're consistent, I think that's kind of the key. Like if you're going to be using like a certain type of casing, keep that consistent in your headlines. If you're going to be using periods, keep that consistent. And I know there are different rules and different preferences, but I would say that's something that you mostly want to focus on, is just keeping those consistent so nothing feels out of place.
Gotcha.
But again, this site work with awesome copywriters to help, you know, keep that consistent and write really punchy headlines and copy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sometimes we'll get content docs and it's like, oh, this is 15 pages. That's cool. We'd much rather have that, but then trying to condense that into something that's consumable and is appealing to the eye. That's tough, and that's what Beth is really good at.
I'll add too. I know we just talked about using Figma Mirror. I'd say I'm on a big monitor. I have a 32-inch monitor, but I also check things on a laptop because I am super guilty of designing at 50 or 75% in Figma and then zooming in and being like, wow, this site's really big. Everything seems too large. I think we're all guilty of it at Unfold. It's just sort of a thing where I need this space to design, so I'm zoomed out, but then you design things and lay it out and it just looks massive. So constantly be cross-referencing with real devices. If you have a PC or something, go look at it there, sort of in live view. In the same way, have iPads, phones, and all that, just to kind of keep everything in check. Because you can really easily kind of get things out of control, and then you have an entire website that's a little bit too big. So I know some of that can be correct with scaling, like you talked about Yankee in the past. We can just scale the whole site down and all that, but starting with the right sized font is helpful with like Figma Mirror and all that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like I've definitely done that too. So I've been trying to incorporate those kind of more into my workflow to get that experience of like what the final product would be like. Well, Alex, do you want to run us through, we have a style guide as a quick example, and then like what if we were to design this in a different style and we didn't go with the kind of high-end sophisticated look?
Yeah, I just cooked this up a little bit ago. This is a real quick attempt, but if we didn't have the serif and some of those certain brand kind of touch points, I think having a big old chunky sans serif font behind with a sort of a split in the hierarchy, so we have sort of an eyebrow and then a really, really large punchy type was sort of my quick attempt at sort of a different style here. I only have sort of this top hero section done, but replacing any use of serif across the board. And so we have everything kind of sans serif, using different thicknesses, different weights in the font can add that hierarchy. And so we have thinner numbers than we probably would have before. And then we have sort of the normal paragraph text and all that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but this was sort of my quick attempt at how to make a slightly different style. I think there's some other things to do too. The colors, so the crimson and the blue, feels a little bit more corporate, a little bit more kind of high end. And so if this was a different brand where they wanted to, appeal to slightly younger crowd or people in the kind of the crypto space or something, the colors could be a lot more vibrant and wild. It probably wouldn't be this kind of pulled back. It probably wouldn't use the most interesting man in the world. We'd probably use someone a little bit younger. And so those sort of choices all kind of impact the overall brand. But in terms of typography, that was sort of my choice on that.
Yeah, I'd say that's like a great way to point out how much typography like affects the look. Like like it does make a big difference, but it also, a lot of other things are involved to make a cohesive look. Like now, like you pointed out, the colors might not feel right. The imagery might not feel as like tied into the overall look, but typography is a really big way to set the tone for a site.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're just coming up on 3 o'clock. Want to be respectful of everybody's time. Before we sign off, well, let me first ask, do you guys have anything else that you want to talk about, or can I sign us off? And I have 2 quick hitter questions I want to ask you guys before we leave.
I don't have anything to add.
I'm good.
Alex, you?
I'm good. No.
Awesome. All right. So just 2 quick questions. Don't even think about it. You just got to answer. For each of you guys, let's go. We'll go, Alex, you go first, then Benton. The 2 questions are: 1, if you could only design with one font for the rest of the year and only that font, what is it? And 2, do you have more or less than 200 fonts installed on your computer right now?
Wish you could see my screen. I got, I'll answer the second question. I have well over 200 fonts on my computer.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, I don't even know.
It creates fatigue, like decision fatigue, because like Figma, I'd say too, isn't great at like font selection. It's just like an agnostic list. There's no styling to it. So like Figma, get with it, have a little preview or something. So that I'd say that having too many choices is crippling in some ways. I have probably a couple thousand. I wish you could see what I'm saying. I'm just scrolling through my fonts at the moment.
Take a screenshot.
Way too many.
Here. Oh,
I should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you take a screenshot of the scroll, but yeah.
Well, especially Noto, that I have this font. It's just a side rant. I have this font that I don't know where to find it. I think it's the system font, but there's literally 500,000 versions of this font. And it just makes me scream. So, and then what was your first question? What font I would use? That's just a snippet of the Noto font.
Just a little bit.
And I'm like, how would I ever use the? Anyway, that's a good question, and I'm terrible at probably sticking to one. I'm going to be boring and say Inter, just because it's versatile. It's what we had initially on the Stylescape over here. It's versatile. It's boring, but you can do a lot of fun stuff with it. I don't know if you want to follow me, Yankee, but like.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Being sort of a sans serif, it's safe, but at the same time, you can make those same kind of design choices where we have a really, really big, punchy, impactful headline, but we could also have a much, much smaller kind of refined look and feel. So due to its versatility and kind of plainness, I'd say that, just because it's a blank slate. But that's
And Benton?
Alex kind of took my answer. Like if I wanted like a really neutral typeface, Inter would definitely be it. But from some of my past projects, like with like the Reloom Design League, there was a site that I did where I used, and I'm totally spacing on the Type Foundry now, but it was Sony, I think Sohne, and there was it was a whole family which I really liked. I don't have it in here, unfortunately.
I was gonna say we should bring it in.
Yeah, maybe I could drop it somewhere.
Or you have a screenshot? Do you have a screenshot of it?
Hold on a second. See if I have it. I think I have it saved in here. Let me see. Oh no. Oh, here we go. So there's a bunch of different ones.
Wait, where is it at?
Oh, here. See, now I can't.
Oh, right here. You can't edit it. Yeah, this is what you used on the RDL. Is this the one from the
it's from the EV
electric
one?
Vehicle one? Yeah.
Yeah, of course I have all the weights all wacky right now, but there was a few on here. I think it was one of these, and I used uppercase, I believe.
Oh yeah, that's what you used. I know people were. Yeah, everybody was asking what it was because they liked it so much.
Yeah, but there's like some nice options there, but that one's definitely more limited. Inter has a lot more weights and options. And if I had to only use one, it'd probably be that one.
Yeah, we didn't even get here to parse labs. I'm guessing we were going to use this to kind of talk about the way they use their fonts, but that'll be for another day, I think.
Yep.
So I think that is it for us. Thanks everyone who joined. And Hibba's going to kill me if I don't get this right, but I think our next tea time is not this next coming Friday, but the one after that. And I could be wrong, but I think that might be Friday the 17th, maybe. But anyways, not the next Friday, but the one after that. That's when we'll be live again with Key Time. So make sure you tune in. And Alex and Benten, thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. And yeah, we'll see you all next time.
See you guys.
Thanks.